This episode of ChatGPD was made possible by the hard work and creativity of our production team. A huge thank you to Emily Young, Chris Sang, and Alakia Chandran for their expert production, editing, and behind-the-scenes magic that brings each conversation to life. We also want to thank Sarah Topa and the IMS for their support in helping us share ideas, stories, and resources that empower our grad students at every stage of their journey.
Welcome to another episode of ChatGPD, our podcast on careers in biomedical sciences. I'm Pamela Plant, and I'm the Director of Graduate Professional Development at the IMS, and I'm here today with Dr. Pascal Tyrrell, who is the Director of Data Science for Medical Imaging in the Faculty of Medicine at U of T. He's also an IMS faculty and the Director of EDIIA, and an associate professor with the Department of Stats. Welcome, Pascal.
Thank you, Pamela, for the kind invitation.
So before we talk about the big elephant in the room, which is AI and the impact of AI on our graduate students and their career trajectories, I just want you to talk about your journey because you have a fascinating journey. So if you could tell us what your journey was from, let's say, undergraduate, because you even have interesting career trajectory between graduate degrees. So could you just very briefly tell us about your education, your history, and what led you to what you are doing today at the university?
Sure. So absolutely my pleasure to talk about it because, as you say, it is an interesting journey. I'll preface it with it's all good now, but at the time, it probably wasn't as rosy. And so I'll explain that. So my undergraduate is, I did it at Concordia University in Montreal, and it was in cell and molecular biology, nothing too fancy there. But I started my master's at Concordia in a lab that was in cyanobacterial physiology. And my supervisor at the time, George Espy, accepted a position here at U of T. So I followed him here to U of T. At the beginning, and you'll probably remember when we started, we were in the microbiology department, which closed immediately upon when we arrived, and it became the botany department because we worked with algae. And I did 7 years of graduate work, so my master's and transitioned to my PhD, and did 4 years of PhD, and I loved it. So working in the lab and growing algae in the culture rooms was fantastic, and I loved every minute of it. And I realized at that time that what I really enjoyed was learning, and I think that's probably what led to a very diverse career because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And so near the end of my PhD in botany, I realized that I was looking at a postdoc in Long Island for $27,000, and I went, what? Do I really want to do that? And so I said, nope, that's not for me, because at the time, being a professor, in my opinion, was boring, and so I wanted to get out there and get a job. And so I did, and so I joined the computer industry as a computer programmer. At the time, it was the late 90s, so it was Y2K, so year 2000. Which was a big deal, and so I did COBOL programming, COBOL kicks.
Is that something you developed on your own on the side during your PhD, or were you doing computation work during your PhD?
Great question. So yes, I got my first computer in 1981. And that was, using the VIC-20, the Commodore VIC-20. And I learned basic programming, and I just enjoyed it. And, what happened, unfortunately, is I exceeded the capacity of the computer because there was very little memory at that time, and what you could do with it was very little. And so then I kind of got bored of it and I set it aside. But I obviously had learned how to be a programmer. And then during my graduate studies in botany, for that matter, I actually brought it back out. So I started programming for the lab in order to do all the mathematical calculations. I just built a program that the lab used to make it easier. So that's what brought me back into programming. And so because I enjoyed it, I then applied for a position as a junior programmer in the life insurance industry for COBOL programming. And they had an aptitude test in order to get into the position. And I wrote the test and I did actually exceedingly well. And so then they brought me on and that was it. I just started working as a programmer. So that was great. Loved it. Once again, kind of got a little bit bored of it, as you see the trend, because of I really enjoyed learning. So once I had kind of done really well in the position as a programmer, and there's, every 6 months is when you have a new release in software, you don't do anything. So you just sit around. So I started programming utilities and tools for other programmers, and that got a little frustrating for the company. And so that didn't really work out. And so then I got recruited out to work as a recruiter in the IT world. And that was wonderful, because that was introduction to working with people, which was amazing. But then once again, I just kind of realized, this is not really what I would like. And so I left that, and I ended up at Sick Kids, so the Hospital for Sick Children, working as a data manager. Did that for 5 years, which was great.
Did you kind of leverage those networks and connections that you made during your recruitment phase?
That's a great question.
That sounds like a really good.
Yeah. Interestingly, no,
Okay.
but I could have. That's interesting. But I did leverage, of course, my experience, as a programmer, which I did a lot of database work as well. And so then when I landed the position as data manager, that was very helpful.
Yeah.
So my graduate work was definitely, my academic experience was
Aligned,
important.
yeah.
And then my experience in the computer industry is what got me the job. And then I worked in rheumatology for 5 years, and once again, wonderful, loved it. And that drew me back into academic research, or medical research in this case. And then I realized, well, I should probably get a degree. And I wasn't quite sure what to do. So actually, interestingly enough, and I don't tell this very often, but I actually enrolled in the MHA, so the Master of Health Administration, because they thought, oh, you should go into administration. I thought, yeah, And then 4 months into the program, or 5 months, I was like,
Not for me.
bro, not doing this. So I left that, but then right after, I actually joined the IMS in my PhD. And I completed my PhD here, was clinical epidemiology with, kind of a real bent on statistics. And that's why I ended up currently with the Department of Statistical Sciences. But that was kind of where I ended up in terms of, now I'm ready. I want to be, in this world of academia. I want to do research. I'm happy at Sick Kids. I now have my PhD. What do I do? So I worked for the Labatt Family Heart Center as kind of a research associate / postdoc. I did that for about a year, and then started looking for a job. And of course, there were no jobs at that time. And, there were a couple of jobs, like way away in Saskatoon, and, and my kids and my wife at the time said, yes, that's fantastic. Have a great trip. We'll see you when you come back. And so then inevitably, and waiting for a job at U of T was just painful. So I said, you know what? This is it. I'm going to switch again. And I went into the financial industry. So then I became a licensed financial advisor. So that was, for me, that was like, it's more fun and candy, right? Brain candy. I had to license and learn the financial industry. So that was fantastic. And it was, once again, it was people. So I had to, go door knocking, meet my clients, which was great. But inevitably, when do you meet your clients? Evening and weekend. So I wasn't seeing my kids, and it was getting frustrating. So I left that. But luckily at that time, I had some great contacts from, Sick Kids. And one of them was a PI here in the Department of Medical Imaging. And he said, hey, our boss is looking for somebody to do data science, right? And that's Alan Moody, who's became my first boss. So I met him, and 2 weeks later I was hired, and I was hired as a research associate. And then that was it. That was the start of my career now, which is, academic, educator essentially, and research. At the time when I was hired, the focus was education. So as an educator for the department. But then I accepted a position as assistant professor, and then I've been with medical imaging ever since. IMS came later, but that was a big change for me as well, which is really nice, kind of a full circle, right? Because I did my PhD here, and then coming back to contribute to the IMS has been great. But that's the journey in a nutshell. There's obviously a little bit more to it, but the common theme is learning. Really enjoy learning. Can't be challenged enough. And has it been great for me? Yes, from where I sit today. Going through the process, wow, I got to tell you, it was hard. It was hard. You ask my wife, and I wasn't a happy guy the whole time.
There are a few things I was going to take from that story. One is you're a doctor. So sorry, I just introduced you as doctor. Should have doubled that up. Second is you've got to be with somebody that is very patient, understanding, and solid, because there are a lot of fluctuations and uncertainty. So that was probably key to you.
Yeah.
And I think it's also really a good lesson in linear trajectories are possible, but they're probably not the rule. I think the rule is you just pivot from opportunity to opportunity and just kind of make your way, always asking yourself, like, am I happy with this? Where do I want to go? What's the next plan?
Correct.
What can I see? Not so much what can I see myself doing? How do I want my life to look and feel? And then you just kind of keep pivoting in there.
Yeah.
So
actually, sorry, let me add to that, because that's a great comment. And it's a little bit of a paradox that I only realize now, being older and having been there, is, I ignored when people told me it's not the destination, it's the journey that counts. Because I was told that many times when I was in graduate school and, I was in my 20s, and completely ignored it. And it's only I realize now that it's absolutely true. Like, it really is true that the destination really doesn't matter. It's the journey. But here's the rub. If you're in your 20s and you're a graduate student, it's not expected that you can actually appreciate that, because you really do look at what's next, exactly as you say. Where am I going? Where's my job? But if you can even just a little bit enjoy the journey, I really do believe that ultimately you'll end up in a better place.
absolutely.
But it's so hard to see. And I didn't either.
And then also, and I do want to pivot, but I just want to end by saying, like, the analogy I use is when you're playing golf, you need to be able to see the flag on the green to know where to aim. So you got to have something to shoot for and sink your teeth into to kind of go and then appreciate the journey. But the journey is only a journey when you kind of have some sense of direction. So
Agreed.
But let's shift gears, because you're here about AI. So AI, when was AI on the radar for you? What form did it take, and how did that influence what you do?
So once again, I'm going to say I'm just a lucky guy. And yes, I worked very hard to be lucky, granted, but really it was a lucky guy. So when I was hired in the Department of Medical Imaging, Alan Moody, the chair at the time, was interested in bringing data to medical imaging. So it was in 2013. So in 2013, it was just the beginning of the big data era, right? So what is big data? And, and this big thing of, wow, we're collecting so much data. How are we going to deal with it? It's coming in so fast and so diverse. We don't know what to do with it. So those were the big data years. And so I was hired to kind of investigate that. How can we leverage data to improve our department, essentially, whether it be education or research or administration? So I said, great. And because I had a background in statistics, that fit extremely well. And because I was a programmer from, a previous job, I was, good at computers and understanding computer software. And because I had worked at SickKids for a bunch of years as a scientist, essentially contributing to academic research, I was skilled enough to actually be a data scientist. And so I worked at that, and everything was wonderful. And then this thing came along called AI, and it was machine learning and AI. And it came along, maybe about 4 years after or something like that. But interestingly, it was already a thing in the computer science world, because Jeffrey Hinton, won ImageNet in 2012. And so that was even a year before I started in medical imaging. But it didn't really become a thing in medicine, or the idea, until probably like 2015, 14 or 15. And that's when it kind of literally landed in my lap. And people were saying, hey, there's all this cool stuff, these different machine learning algorithms that you can use. And I was using them in stats, just as kind of quirky things that I was doing in stats, a lot of unsupervised learning and clustering. That was an area of interest for me. And I'm like, well, I kind of do that all anyway, And so I took an interest to it, of course. Why not? I'm a data scientist, and AI there was a lot of interest, and so then I just dug in and I started working in the area, and it just grew from there. I started taking on students, and we did projects in AI, and from there it just grew. So did I seek it out? No. Was I lucky enough to recognize its importance early? Yes. So good for me.
And AI takes many forms. I mean, it's large language models, machine learning in general, many different applications. But like, what do you think what are the biggest breakthroughs in AI today? And maybe can you do predictions of where you see it going in 5 to 10 years that will impact our students, particularly biomedical graduate students? We want that focus because those are most of our listeners. But can you tell us what you think are these big breakthroughs that are influencing them today? And what are the ones that you predict are going to be the biggest impact on our students in the future?
I mean, that alone could be a podcast.
Yes.
But I'm actually gonna, recognize Geoffrey Hinton a little bit, because you should be, of course. But also, he was working at it his entire career essentially, and late 80s, he was working on machine learning, right? And where he got stuck was that there was not the compute capacity and the amount of storage required to run the algorithms he was running. But he realized early on that if you could increase the number of parameters in your model, that you could potentially increase prediction. You could improve prediction by incorporating so much more than we were doing in classical statistics, where you would like whittle it down to 5 parameters. And then you would say, wow, this is a fantastic model, but you realize that it's not that great because you end up with what's called a biased model, right? And he realized there was a better way of doing this, and that's what he did with those neural networks. But it didn't work until we had the compute power and we had the storage, which is what happened basically in 2012 with his competition. And then it just grew from there. So all the deep learning came out and that. So I'm going to say, not to oversimplify it, but machine learning and artificial intelligence is just basically an extension of better models, right? You're modeling, you're improving your models, and because of the tools we now have, we can create these models that are just extremely complex, but actually are useful. So there's utility to these models. And so your large language model is a good example of how immense a model it is, with the number of parameters that are involved. But because of it, it provides you with something that's useful. So I'm going to say, the future of AI is exactly that. It's going to be a continual growth or extension of what's possible using this technology. And it's going to become more and more useful for us. I think that's the key, is utility. So a lot of discussion is how AI is going to morph from being a very useful tool to becoming sentient, to being a being, which is, in my opinion, just ridiculous. Like it's really not what AI is for, right? AI is truly a tool. And it's considered a technology. And as you know, by definition, a technology is just a process or a tool that improves our efficiency in doing what we do every day, right? To support, our environment, right? And so AI is just a tool. So if you don't use it properly, it's just like you have a hammer. A hammer is a tool. A hammer is technology, right? And it improves the process of building homes, for instance, and using nails to put together your frame. But if you hit someone in the head with your hammer, it becomes a weapon. So it's a little bit the same discussion with AI, and people are losing track of that the purpose of AI is it's a tool to serve us by improving, how we do things and increasing efficiency on how we do things as humans. And that's it. End of story. But yes, if you weaponize it, then yeah, it's terrible, and we shouldn't be doing that. But we lose track, right, of what it's for.
That's another podcast
Yeah.
entirely. I'd love to unpack that with you because that's like a fascinating topic. And, Jeff Hinton is very concerned and
He
has
is.
spent most of his time,
Rightly so.
right, educating people about the proper uses. And, that's another discussion. But how is AI changing the kinds of skills that employers are looking for from new grads?
Yeah. So I think that is probably one of the biggest concerns, right, for graduate students especially, but all students, and I think everybody for that matter, is how's the landscape changing because of AI? And I think that's the best way of describing it, is the landscape is changing. And so the way to look at it is a little bit like it's a technology that's supposed to improve, right, our the way we interact with our environment. However, not everybody is necessarily comfortable with it. So let's say we're all riding around on horses, and somebody pulls up in a car next to us in our horses and say, hey, this is the way to go, because it's quicker and gets to where you want to go. And we're sitting on our horses. So the question is, do you get off your horse and get into the car, or do you continue to ride your horse, right? And so that's a decision you need to make, right? And there's no right or wrong decision. It's just that, forcibly, as the history of cars, it has become the predominant way of travel in the world. And so, people don't ride on horses now to get to work. And so AI is a little bit the same way. So if you see AI as a threat to you, and you're not comfortable getting off your horse and getting into a car, just realize that you will be left behind, and there's not really any choice about it. So when you're, to get back to your question, when you're saying like, what should we be aware of when you're looking for a job? Well, just realize that if the job is saying that you need to know how to use a car, and you're arriving on your horse, then you're going to be at a disadvantage, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you won't get hired, but the chances are you won't, because everyone's switched, right, in the company to driving around. And I think that's probably the biggest concern, is that if you are not aware of that, then you're limiting the possibilities of getting a job.
So are you suggesting people learn about cars, i.e. AI, and what kind of, they know how to drive a horse and buggy, that's a skill. Are they necessarily going to know how to drive a car? Meaning, what kinds of skills do you think are going to be influenced? And are the job opportunities, will AI reduce or expand job opportunities for our biomedical graduate students?
Yeah, excellent question. There is a difference. So my analogy works up to a certain point, and that is, if you get off your horse and you need to get into a car, you realize that you have to know how to drive a car, and you've pointed that out, and that's excellent. And that's a problem, because you don't know how to drive a car. You're afraid of driving at those speeds. You just don't know the rules, etc. In AI, the good thing about AI is it will teach you. And I think that's the piece that people don't understand, is that you can learn this on your own. So it's not like you have to take a course. You don't need to be mentored into how to use it. It's something that it has to come from you, that you are just interested in learning, and you ask, and you can actually ask the LLM for help on how to use it properly. Is it perfect? No, maybe not. But can you? Absolutely. And so I think that's the advantage to this technology, is that you can do this on your own. You really can. You don't have to wait for anybody to point you in the right direction. You can get started on this immediately by choosing, what your flavor, right? Because there's so many.
So let's just use an example of a hypothetical graduate student, PhD student, graduating top of the class, a great number of publications in top level journals. How can that student utilize AI to improve their chances of finding a career? What are some of the ways?
Okay, so first and foremost, everybody should be using AI. Okay, so that's something definitely. So even just, embracing is great, but I'm going to go further. I'm going to say, you should all be using it as much as you possibly can, whether you disagree or not, because you need to learn about it. And if you don't understand how it works and what its limitations are, then you're not going to be in a position to benefit from it or to avoid it if you have to, right? So that's the first thing I'm going to share, is that because we're academics, there's no excuse for us to not truly be knowledgeable about these LLMs. Let's say this is the easiest one, is LLMs. Of course, AI is more than LLMs, but it's not. It's something that we should all know about. So, for instance, what do you prefer? Do you prefer ChatGPT, which is the most common? Compare it to Copilot. Compare it to Claude. Compare it to Gemini. Compare it to DeepSeek. There's no reason for you to not be trying all of these different LLMs to see how they respond to you, how you feel, which one do you feel more comfortable with.
And what the differences are between them in terms of security, safety, training, etc.
That's exactly right.
Let's start with that. What are some of the parameters that students should be aware of when they are exploring these different models?
Yeah. So the biggest one, I think, is going to be, I'm even going to call it stylistic. So meaning your personal, like how you personally interact with LLMs is going to determine your success, right? Everybody, not everybody, but I'm sure most people have heard that the limitations to using, LLMs is how you prompt them. Absolutely, and there's been so much written about that, and some advice that's been given, and so definitely because the LLMs are all different, right? They're all different models that have been trained, conceptually the same way, but what each LLM represents is a different path to what its current state is. And so it is different. So meaning there is different styles, and the way it responds to you is going to be different between them. And you need to learn, what works for you and what gives you back something that's not a hallucination. So I tell this to my children who are in university. And, if you ask an LLM and you say, please write me an introduction to my paper, that's it. That's your prompt, right? It's actually going to write you an introduction because it's going to completely hallucinate. And the reason for that is because it's been trained by reinforcement learning, mostly at this part of it, to please you, right? That's what it's been trained to do. It gets rewarded to give you something that you want, right? So if you just ask it for it and it completely hallucinates, and then everyone says, oh my God, it's garbage. Well, that's because you haven't prompted it at all and you forced it to hallucinate.
But I'm finding it will prompt you now and say, what is the topic of your paper?
Yes,
I would love to help.
Yeah, exactly.
But what are you writing about? And be a little more specific. So now it learns to prompt you.
Correct. And absolutely right. And that's been because of the hallucinations that it has improved. But that's actually where I think as academics and especially as graduate students, that is where I draw the line. So I encourage my students, all of my students, no matter who, to use ChatGPT, to use LLMs. Of course, it has to be compliant with your instructor. That's the policy at University of Toronto, and I fully support it. But I am the instructor, and so I'm telling my students you can absolutely use it. Yeah. So the tricky bit though is if you get it to hallucinate, the way you ask it, it hallucinates, or as you say, if it prompts you back, okay, maybe if it asks you the right way, the same, what are you talking about, topics and stuff like that. But really, you should go out of your way to learn to prompt it correctly. And that's what you learn from our courses. So what we teach you, we still have something to offer, is what we're teaching you is, what you should be aware of. Yeah, what is, how do you formulate a good research question is still something you need to know. And that's what you're going to prompt. And so if you prompt any of the LLMs with that, you're going to get an excellent answer back, right? Immediately. And I think that's what I encourage all graduate students to do, is not just be swayed by it and just kind of go with the flow and think that it's going to do everything for you. Absolutely not. You still need to be a graduate student. However, you have this amazing tool at your disposition that you should learn how to use correctly and so that you improve what you're doing. So
I think I'm 100% on board with you. I am a massive adopter and encourager because it's here to stay and it can make your life so much more efficient and effective. One of my favorite models is Scopus. And Scopus AI, for graduate students out there that don't know it, tap into this because it can really help you write your papers, your introductions, do a very wide and thorough literature search. So there's so many different models depending on what you want to achieve to educate yourself of the different models, what they can do for you, and also be aware that you're at the University of Toronto. So they do encourage Copilot very strongly as opposed to chat. Even though I love chat, I think I like the interface, I like the information it gives me better, but I do use Copilot because when I'm at the university, that's what they encourage. There is a firewall, there is, it's not, I'm not training it with my information. So just to be aware of all of those things. But okay, so basically what I'm hearing from you, Pascal, embrace it. You can prepare by educating yourself on the different models, what it can do for you. What it can do for you is going to vary very dramatically in what you want to do. So I guess, when we go back to how is AI impacting the job market, every student is afraid that AI is wiping out all of these higher educated jobs of higher education. And, you always hear trades are a great thing to be in now because they're AI proof. What can we tell our graduate students other than familiarize yourself, embrace it, use it? What can we tell them today in this podcast about the job market? And what is it going to look like for them? Are they going to be struggling to find jobs because they're being replaced by AI? I don't like to be so fatalistic. I like to be encouraging. Can you just comment on that with regards to careers in academics and industry? How are these jobs being influenced by AI? Obviously, you have to be literate when you go to apply for these jobs, but how are the job opportunities being impacted for our graduate students?
yeah, obviously a big concern with most people. And very challenging to answer because no one has a crystal ball. However, you asked my opinion, so
Yes,
I'll
thank you.
certainly share that. And I don't think you have much to worry about. So I don't believe AI is going to replace positions. It's going to change positions. So meaning the tasks, what you perform, how you perform it, your timelines are going to change. The tools you use, of course, are going to change. However, the actual position is still required. So meaning if you're a company and you're hiring a programmer, for instance, if you're what we used to say, used to be a coder, right? So a coder would just lay code. So back in the day, that was just, cutting and pasting. Well, at the time, even cutting and pasting wasn't an easy task, but you would type in, the code, modify it, and get it to work in a new section. So that kind of job is gone. So that's gone. So meaning that, being able to code something basic and to cut and paste it into, the major, copybook or something, that's certainly no longer a possibility. So as a job. However, the ability to use, whatever the company uses for coding, so Cursor, for instance, is a really big one. You need to know how to use that. So the purpose of your job hasn't changed, has it, right? So you're still contributing to the coding, except for you're now using a tool. Let's take it even one further. Let's say the AI can actually code it from scratch and do the whole thing. There still needs it never works immediately. It just doesn't happen. Will it in the future? Maybe, right? But just see the progression. So now you're, instead of laying the code manually yourself, you're then cutting and pasting from, AI. Okay, now we progress to it, lays the code for you. And now you're troubleshooting or you're looking for, making changes, et cetera, et cetera. So your role is still there. The only thing is how you do it and when you do it is now changing. And I think that's pretty much going to be the case right across the board, other than, let's say, for instance, you're an Uber driver and we have self-driving cars. So that role, sure, that one is going to be gone, and there may be a few other roles that will be changed completely and wiped out. But I would say overall, most roles are just going to change in what you do. And that's why I'm saying if you don't embrace AI, then you're not going to be in position to, get that role or continue in that role.
Yeah, and I think, what I always tell students is you still need humans to talk to other humans. So, especially I'm thinking like a lot of our students go into industry, we need medical science liaisons to be the interface between a physician, a primary care physician, and a pharmaceutical company. We need now how you get your information, how you prepare slide decks. Maybe in medical affairs, that's a big impact in AI because that's production of materials that is going to be very AI heavy. But at the end of the day, you need to establish a relationship, and that's with a human. So there are a lot of jobs for our graduate students that are going to be AI proof. They're just going to be, like you said, very heavily impacted on how they do what they do with AI. So the skills, I really like the analogy of the core competencies that they develop in the course of their degrees are still going to be really important because they need humans in these roles that they are applying for. I don't think industry is going to shrink for biomedical graduate students that quickly that they are going to, see all of these job opportunities being wiped out, but it's going to impact the way they do things. Now,
Agreed.
okay, so we talked about some of the literacies that they should know and how they can balance the skills that they learn from their graduate school and leverage those into their new roles. What other advice would you have for them other than embrace it and learn it and don't run away from it? Are there specific skills or competencies or resources or, I know you said to just go on and play around on the LLMs. Is it just the LLMs or are there other models that you think are going to be necessary for them to increase their value to a potential employer in the future? Can you speak to some resources?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you have a few parts to that question. So I'll definitely start with what can you do, right? And so I think one of the biggest challenges is people are frozen, right? So they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do next. I don't know how to use it, and they get frustrated. And so I'm going to say, think of ways that you can incorporate it more and more every day. And in order to do that, it's like any tool. You have to learn how to use it, and you need to adapt it to what you want to do. And I think where people, get stuck is that they don't learn to appreciate the limits to each tool and what they're good at. What those tools are useful for and what they're good for. And so that's something that you can spend time doing and pay attention. So you're once again, I'm sure people are thinking, well, what do you mean? So a good example is to have multiple LLMs that are open on your desktop, right? So why don't you have a link to DeepSeek that's working with ChatGPT, with Copilot and Claude, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't necessarily have to put the prompt in each one. I mean, we're all scientists. So yes, do I do that? Sure I do, because I want to see, compare what comes down. But, if that's not your thing, that's okay. Just go use different, use them all a little bit. And then you're going to develop preferences. So I do have preferences. I use ChatGPT for certain things. I use Copilot for other. I use, DeepSeek for other and Claude for, because I know I just enjoy, the LLM for the different tasks. And I think if you don't actually try it, then you're not going to learn that, and you're going to be stuck on one of the LLMs and you're going to get frustrated, right? As you pointed out correctly, if you do have sensitive or private data, then you don't have a choice, right? So then you are going to be using Copilot because, as you say, it's behind the firewall, and that's the appropriate thing to do. But if you're using it for tasks that are truly just administrative, or there's no sensitive data, and you're just asking it to reword something, that you can upload, then you can use all of them, right? Or the best thing is asking questions, right? So you're developing a research question. You want to know, who's done what, like, has anybody thought of this before? And then you can certainly use all the different LLMs. Coding's the same thing. And so I think that's probably what I would say people should start doing, is learning their preferences. And if they truly don't enjoy any of it, then fine, they've gave it a go and they've understood it. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but it's possible. So I would say, instead of just embracing, I would say get in front of it. I think everybody needs to embrace it, but I think graduate students need to get in front of it. So meaning that's your job as a graduate student, right? That's what you do, is investigate and learn, right? So why aren't you taking it seriously and actually assessing the tool properly? That's what you're supposed to do as a researcher. So do it, get out there and check out and actually try and break it, and see where it doesn't work for you and where it does work. Do an experiment. Absolutely. That's what we do day in, day out, right? So that's...
Okay, I really could talk to you for hours, but we are running out of time. We try to keep these pretty limited. There are a couple things that I would really love to hear from you about. And maybe one of them is, if you were graduating from IMS today, how would you approach your career planning differently? Now that you know about the ubiquitous nature and the capacity for AI to do things for you, how would you approach your search and your planning differently, given the advent of AI?
A great question, because I think about that actually quite often. And the first thing I'm going to do is put a plug in for IMS. I really am, because when I completed my degree in the IMS, it really wasn't the IMS of today. And so I'm definitely going to say there's just so much more to the IMS now, and I really would have enjoyed it, and so that there's a plug for IMS. I really believe that. Now, to answer your question, I just think, wow, the ability to ask questions, like, okay, so I say this to everybody I can, is you're not a researcher if you're not asking questions constantly, right? So I get in trouble with friends and my wife especially, because I'm constantly asking questions, and I'm always told, please stop asking questions. It's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. I constantly ask questions because I want to know, right? Yeah. So to have this ability to question, an LLM, no matter what the model is just what? Why? I'm constantly asking questions because it's so easy now. And so I'm absolutely going to say, I wouldn't change anything to my career, because lucky me, I am where I want to be. Good for me. Would I change anything? Could I go back in the past and change anything? No, I wouldn't, because I am where I want to be today. So lucky me. Would I change, or what would I be aware of, upon graduation, is exactly that. The ability to ask questions is just, you can ask anything you want now. And so the ability for you to now, investigate different careers or investigate different trajectories or things you can do is, so much better than it used to be. So you can learn so much. So there's an expression in French called l'embarras du choix, which just means you have the problem of way too much to choose from.
Spoiled for choice.
And it's true. Now you do, but boy, what a wonderful problem to have. Yeah. As opposed to not knowing and then going down a path that didn't turn out for you. Don't get me wrong. As I said, I love learning, and going down the wrong paths did work out for me. But, if you can avoid, going down a path that's going to, maybe not be for you and it's going to set you back, why not take, a path that you think is better, at that time? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's another thing that, unfortunately comes out is where, people will say, well, because I had it hard, you need to have it hard too, and what a load of crap that is, right? So, it just means that, lucky you at this point in your juncture,
you've got such a great tool.
Yeah, you've got such a wonderful tool. Good for you. It doesn't mean you're going to find the right answer.
And really utilize it.
And really,
utilize
exactly.
Exactly. Don't be scared.
Yeah.
You know, you hear so much fear mongering about AI and, it's
totally.
the end of civilization. It's like, don't be afraid.
Nope.
Get in there and
Exactly.
use it because it's an amazing tool.
Exactly.
And we are at the end of our time, but before we go, we usually do a 1-minute pitch about a career. But in your case, because we are largely discussing AI, I would just like you to maybe in 1 minute, and I'll grab my timer, because I know we love to talk. How would you recommend students position themselves with employers with regards to AI? Do they come out and say it in an interview that they have competencies with AI, or how would you recommend them position themselves and their skills with the light of AI to potential employers?
Okay, this one, I think I can keep this one short. That's an excellent question.
I won't even use my timer then.
It's going to be easy. And the reason for it is because when you used to apply for positions, you always put in your skills, you would put, I'm really good with Microsoft Office, right? So you'd say, I can use Excel, I can use Word, I can all these what they call productivity tools, right? And so AI should be considered exactly that. So meaning that you should put it right out there, right up front, and say, yes, I have experience playing around with AI. I use it daily, and this is what I use it for, and this is what I think it's good for, and be ready to answer those questions in an interview, because you will absolutely be using these tools in the company that you're hired in. It may not be ChatGPT because they may have, an enterprise-wide, proprietary tool, but you definitely need to be knowledgeable in how you apply and use these tools. So absolutely, I would say, bring it to the forefront. It is a skill, and it also demonstrates that you're comfortable with using these tools that inevitably the company is going to be supportive of.
Yeah. And one more second. Very well done. And also that you are just a forward-thinking person that embraces technology rather than, being in the dark. So I think it looks good on you that, hey, I embrace this. I use it every day.
Yeah.
Pascal, this has been so much fun talking to you. You're just a very interesting person. I always enjoy every time we talk. And I would just like to invite you back regularly because I think we can do a regular chat AI spot, and we can touch base and see where things are going and how we can give our students the advice and the tools that they need to thrive and succeed in their career planning after their degrees. So thank you so much for coming today.
My pleasure, and happy to come back.